Welcome. This is the third in a series today of panel and conversations as part of the Earth Weeks. I want to thank Tara Gallagher and the Earth Days Committee for organizing everything, the food and groups. I also want to share that we have a book giveaway for anyone that would like. We actually have 4 books that have been donated by the Salem Alliance for the Environment, SAFE. There's a table at the back for SAFE. The first book relates very specifically perhaps to the Project 2025 panel on tyranny, 20 lessons from the 20th century by Timothy Snyder, who looks at the authoritarian governments throughout the 20th century and analyzes that and provides 20 lessons that we can take away. Second is the Serviceberry, Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who also authored Grading Sweetgrass. It's an amazing author and connected to the themes of the week. This third book, I don't know this book, but this is The Japanese Art and Science of Shinsen-yuro, Forest Bathing, How Trees Can Help You Find Health and Happiness. So a third option, if you'd like. And All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis, edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson. So please take one if you'd like. If you're here, they are on the back table, and I want to thank SAFE for donating the books to the panel today. And all of you. And thank you all for attending. My name is Tom Shields. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Politics, Policy, and International Relations. I am also the director of the North Shore Policy Lab, which I think as of today, we can officially say has been established. So that was pretty exciting news. I bumped into the dean in the coffee shop this morning. He told me he signed it. So, as we heard from the previous panel, there's a lot of news. There's a reality that is very dire right now when we think about the cuts to the federal government, the threats to environmental justice funding, and threats to work related to the climate crisis, and just basic science research that is threatened at the moment. So I, for one, am always looking for places for hope, and where I see that is in our local community. Right here in Salem, Massachusetts, Salem has been a leading hub for a just energy transition to a more resilient future. And I am really thrilled to welcome this panel of guests who are all in their own way working on projects related to a just energy future. So starting at the far end, I'd like to welcome Bonnie Bain, who is the Executive Director of the Salem Alliance for the Environment. Welcome, Bonnie. Reverend Nathan Ives, who is the rector of San Pedro St. Peter's Church and is working on the Heaven and Earth Committee, which is, I'll let him describe more about what that is. It's a project that we are also working on in the North Shore Policy Lab, by the way, and I do have positions for Discovery Scholars to be paid to work on that even in the first session of the summer. So if anyone would like to get more involved in that afterwards as a student, particularly first and second year students, please see me, because we do have opportunities for that, to be hired, paid positions. I think I mentioned that. Okay. And third, Dr. Nina Estrella, who's the Executive Director of Star Luna Consulting, working on collaborative governance in an anti-racist and social justice framework. So I want to thank Dr. Estrella Luna for being here as well. All of our panelists, and now Neal Duffy, who is the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency for the City of Salem, who's been involved with all of these projects, has agreed to be our moderator, and we're going to have this as a conversation today. So I'm really glad that you could all be here. Please give our panel another round of applause, and I'll turn it over to Neal.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm really excited to be here and humbled to be part of this panel. I was here for the last panel. Thank you, Professor Luna, for for great information you shared and everyone else. As I was watching that panel, I was thinking, it'd be nice to move the chairs in front of the table, because when we were preparing for this, we were talking about we wanted to have a conversation. I stepped out of the room, and I come back, and Dr. Estrella Luna had already done that, which is, I don't know if that's, and Tom, so that's great. We're all, I don't know if that's good or bad, but we're all wired the same way, so that's great, and that's what we're hoping for, is a conversation between us, but also with all of you. I am the Director of Sustainability and Resiliency for the City of Salem. I've been in this role for a little over 2 years. Prior to working in Salem, I worked for the state. I worked for the Department of Energy Resources in the Green Communities Division for 6 years, where I was liaison to cities and towns in the greater Boston area, including Salem. I was the Northeast Regional Coordinator in that role. Salem, so our department, the Department of Sustainability and Resiliency, I think if people ask me what I do and they don't really know, I think many of you may have a good understanding of what we do, but I think in the simplest terms, for folks who aren't familiar, when we talk, if we categorize like sustainability and resiliency, we talk about reducing emissions or eliminating emissions and trying to meet our goal of net zero emissions by 2050. And then when we talk about resiliency, we're talking about trying to protect ourselves or mitigate the impacts of climate change and have the ability to bounce back from those impacts, whether it's coastal flooding or extreme heat or flooding from rain events or take your pick, drought. But I think that as was discussed in the previous panel and as I think most here acknowledge, sustainability and resiliency goes far beyond that. A lot of the work we do is sort of grounded in the idea of trying to create and develop more sustainable systems, whether that's economic, health, community, and collaborative governance is part of that. And so I think that's part of the work that we try to do as a city as well. The work goes well beyond my department, the department that I work in. It really extends to every department, and so there's a lot of work that doesn't necessarily go through us, much like I was talking to Tara Gallagher, the Director of Sustainability here, or Sustainability Coordinator, Director of Sustainability for Salem State, and it's similar where there's just so much happening, which is great. So it's not that we are in charge of everything that's sustainability and resiliency based in the city of Salem, but we certainly have a hand in it. And a lot of the work that we do when it comes to a just energy transition, I would say, I may modify that and just talk about it as a just transition. There will be we will talk about energy for sure, but a lot of the work that we're doing now, my friends on the panel are involved in, so rather than me talking about that, I will invite them to tell us about themselves and the work that they do and what they're working on with the city. So I'll start with Dr. Nina.
Thank you, yes. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We're gonna try that one again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you. So I am Dr. Nina Estrella Luna. For those of you who cannot trill your R's, please, I invite you to call me Dr. Nina. As I've gotten older, it's harder to hear my name mispronounced, so thank you, Neal, for doing that. I appreciate that deeply. As was mentioned, I own a firm, a consulting firm called Star Luna Consulting. We are an anti-racism and social equity research, policy, and education organization and firm. A lot of our work is in the climate space, not all of our work. We also do immigration work and health and education as well, but we do a lot of work in the climate space. I used to joke it's where the money's at. I don't know if I can say that anymore. So in Salem, we are working with the city and with the community on a project that the city of Salem started many, many years ago called Resilient Together. And specifically, Resilient Together overall is a climate action plan, I think that'd be fair to say, that the city of Salem and Beverly created several years ago. Salem decided, to its credit, that they wanted to focus their climate resilience work on the Point neighborhood. So how many folks here know where the Point is? All right, quite a lot of you. All right, excellent. I'm so happy to say that. So for those of you who don't know, the Point neighborhood, just up the street, just up Lafayette, right before you get to downtown. It is a currently predominantly Latino, immigrant, low-income, working-class neighborhood. It is one of the older neighborhoods of the city. It has historically been an immigrant, working-class neighborhood. In its long history, today it happens to be Latino-focused. And this neighborhood is vulnerable to a lot of impacts to climate change. Physically, it's vulnerable because of how close it is to the harbor, to the water, but it's also socially vulnerable. Low-income people, immigrant neighborhoods have historically been neglected, disinvested in. The conditions that folks live with when you are low-income, when you are an immigrant, even before the current nonsense, those conditions of living make you more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Right, so if you are displaced from your housing because of flooding, it's much harder when you're low income to find new housing. And that was even before the current nonsense with the housing market, right? So the focus on the Point neighborhood is actually because I work across the state, I can say Salem is so impressive in the sense that they were one of the first to recognize that, oh, we probably do need to look at our socially vulnerable communities. Let's focus on it. Before the state developed MVP 2.0, which they are now also a part of, and then I also get to help support, which is a state program that basically is telling cities and towns across the state, let's get you to focus on socially vulnerable communities as part of your climate resilience planning. So Resilient Together has, for the Point, specifically for the Point, has sort of two buckets, and I am leading one of those buckets. My partners at Linnaean Solutions lead what's called the Climate Leadership Resilience Council, or WORK, which has 3 arms. So there's a creative core, which is very much focused on arts and using art and art sensibility around communications and community education. There's a curriculum group that's also developing a curriculum with several middle schools here in Salem to integrate learning around climate with civics, which is awesome. And then there's a recently developed leadership team, Bonnie, I think you're on a part of that as well, which is kind of doing a lot of overall work around community response around climate issues. The part that I lead is the participatory action research. So as a research firm, we do a lot of research. Most of our research is either community-based, community-engaged, or participatory action research. So this is research that's done in order to make change, in order to make social change. This PAR project is, we work with a group of residents who have decided what are the questions around climate that they want answers to so that they can advocate for themselves and for the community. And so the 2 that we're working on right now, there were 4 research goals. The 2 that we're working on right now, we started one in the fall around water quality, and we have partners here at Salem State in the chemistry department who we've been working with, who've been doing water testing. For that, we're very excited. We were very happy to see that the water is safe, but we're going to continue that water testing work. We're also doing a survey to document the experiences that residents are having with the water that comes out of their tap. Now, a lot of folks are asking, how is that a climate thing, right? I'm going to come back to that because it is a climate issue. The second project that we are just starting off right now, also with partners here at Salem State, a lot of which are in the room right now, that's our Rats and Trash project. So the residents of the Point basically are asking, what is going on with all of this rats and trash? How can we deal with it? right? What do we do about it? So we're doing two things with our partners here in the Geography Department and with the North Shore Policy Lab, where we are kicking off this week documenting the problems with rats and trash in the neighborhood. What we want to just figure out is, where is it concentrated? How is it happening? Where is it happening? Are there patterns, and what can the city do about it? Right, so once we can document what's going on, how can we do something about that? And we're approaching this from a collaborative governance perspective. So we're doing this as part of working with the city to work collaboratively with the residents in solving problems. How is this connected to climate? Because traditionally you think about sea level rise, storm surge flooding, heat's a major impact that needs more attention. The thing about socially vulnerable neighborhoods is that their vulnerability is always rooted in power or lack of power. So all of this research that we're doing together is really aimed at not just understanding these problems, which water is definitely connected to climate change, water quality is connected to climate change, but so are rats and trash. Because it's rooted in, if we can solve these problems, we can then work collaboratively to solve all the other problems that climate change is bringing upon us. And so, and by the way, rats, how many people have noticed, if you're a Salem resident, there's more rats around? Handful of you. The rest of you are either not noticing it or pretending like you're not seeing it. That's directly a climate change impact. Our warmer weather, the warmer winters that we've been having, is not killing off enough of the rats over the winter, and that's why we have more rats around. So as our winters continue to warm, we're gonna see more and more of that kind of thing. And then of course that has public health impacts as well. Even though rats are cute and they are very smart, but they also have public health impacts. So we do a lot of research in collaboration with the city. This is all, the city's been great partners around that, to build the understanding of the conditions of the neighborhood and build the power of the residents to work with the city to solve problems together. So that's what we do. Pass it off to.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. My name is Nathan Ives, and St. Peter's San Pedro Episcopal Church is in the center, nearest the Peabody Essex Museum. Large granite building. The property is a church, one of the oldest churches in the country, 8th oldest in Massachusetts, and a multicultural bilingual church. So we serve the point. That's where 60% of our parishioners come from. And we are in a climate crisis as a church. We have a wicked old gas steam boiler that needs to die and is in the process of doing so of its own accord, but we're helping it along. And the trouble is coming up with its replacement. And so National Grid knocked on the door some 2 years ago and said they needed to change the meter. And we let them in, they did that, and the bill went from $100 a month to $3,000 a month in 1 month and has continued ever since. Right there. So it's for that reason also, but it's polluting, it's doing an awful thing. And so we're a climate conscious church that wants to do the right thing and to be green. I drive an electric car, I have solar panels on my house. I just finished planting about 80 trees in my town, and we just want to do the right thing. So we decided to look at geothermal, and then we met HEAT, H-E-E-T, which in Massachusetts is like a vaccination of love and help and caring and wicked intelligence to help you do climate things, HEAT. And Angie at HEAT and so forth said, there's a grant you could go for, $50,000. And so we went for it and we got it. It's a community feasibility study grant, and it's awesome. And it was really exciting to do this. And what we did was we studied the neighborhood and who around us could partner with us. And we knocked on doors and introduced ourselves and helped them down from ledges as they heard this concept. And you know, we're trying to, because all people can think about is oil and gas usually, and electric. So needless to say, we finished the grant. We have completely deployed that. We've made some connections with amazing engineers. We've been working with Achieve Renewables and BTQ some just remarkable companies. And we have 24 buildings in our neighborhood, including our own, and 20 neighbors that own those buildings that are willing to consider the concept of networked geothermal beyond the church. And so there would be, a compendium of boreholes in different places to have the geothermal system, and then it would be a network shared system. And they always look in those things for complementarity. They want to have buildings that are complementary in the way they heat and cool. You don't want to have all heat dominant things, you want to have some cooling dominant places, and it all mixes out. So if I got excess heat, I can dump it into the system and you can benefit for them because you need that excess heat. And so one of the most enthusiastic responders to our grant was the Salem Housing Authority, who almost did backflips when we talked about this and bring to fore some really big buildings and with a lot of tenants. So that's one big part. That's Earth in our Heaven to Earth project. And then I'll just say that there have been a tremendous amount of blessings at the church, not the least of which are the folks that are gathered here today with me, who have been so supportive of our efforts. And one entity kind of came to our awareness through Tom's wife, the Professor Alexandra Pinero Shields, a student who worked for a company called CESI, Clean Energy Solutions Incorporated out of Boston. And CESI looks at bringing environmental justice through environmental proactive energy efficiency steps and so forth. And so they took an interest in us when we were introduced, and that's where Heaven comes in. And not the only way, but anyhow. And so the Heaven Project is where we do a solar microgrid that's community-based, beyond just the church. And it's designed to create St. Peter's, among other places in the city, that would be climate resilience hubs to help the low-income residents of Salem for climate excessive heat emergencies and excessive cooling emergencies, so they have a place to go if their energy is disrupted. Always on large scale battery storage, so they can power up and get all the emergency things that they need. So, and so now we're working at how do we do that? But there's an extra special benefit to this. And CESI brought this to us, and that was that there's an ability to use the RECs to benefit the low-income neighbors are in the point, so that their electrical bills as ratepayers for utility would be lowered by the energy we develop and we create. And so it has, not only is it socially conscious and environmentally conscious just to do it out of course to go green, but you're helping low-income folks that really need that help to do that. Because we're a church that's out there writing checks to help people pay their electric bills when they're overwhelmed by this, or their rental assistance and all these other things. So Heaven and Earth has now existed for 2 years and counting. It's an amazing team of all these collaborators, and not the least of which has been Neal Duffy in the city of Salem. The mayor, the city of Salem, Neal's office, they have been there with us every step of the way. And we've been writing grants together, so we've written a total of about $850,000 worth of grants so far. We're waiting on 2 large ones at the moment. We have already received $250,000, and we're writing more as we go. So it's a multi-million-dollar effort. It will be going for many years. We don't, it's not yet defined as to where the different components will be specifically. It's studied, but it's a conversation in motion, and we will not be deterred. So hope is alive.
And how long does it take to heat the church?
I have to heat it. I set it at 5:30 in the evening. It comes on for Sunday service. And by the way, the church, because of that bill, it's all winter long I'm wearing sweaters. And only the office is heated to a little degree. Everything else is zero. We've been just risking freezing the pipes, but we haven't yet, so.
All right, so my name is Bonnie Bain. I'm with Salem Alliance for the Environment. Is this on? Can y'all hear me? Okay. So SAFE has been around for over 2 decades, and we were founded around shutting down the coal plant in Salem. We had that at our port for many, many years. It was impacting residents' health. People in Marblehead were getting cancer. It was bad news. And so we were founded soon after 9/11 to shut that down. And we've been around ever since, and we've been an agitating force for good, hopefully, in the city of Salem. We were the force that pushed for a sustainability department to exist, right? So we've been an engine for community power and for systems change for all those years. And we really sort of had a resurgence in the last 3 years because this vision we've had all along for just transition at our port is looking like it will be realized. So we're going to see a wind marshaling facility in Salem, hopefully. And we played a really large role in ensuring that equity was at the center of that development. That was things like working with Mass Hire and doing outreach around the region, around ensuring that local communities find pathways into the clean energy workforce in general, right? Not just the wind port, but as we transition our energy systems, there are all kinds of opportunities that can arise for residents. And so ensuring that, in particular, our environmental justice residents are at the forefront of that was a key initiative that we helped launch. We didn't quite know we were going to do this, but we ended up really involved in the community benefit agreement that was struck with the city and the developer. It's in the name, community benefit agreement, and we really wanted to ensure that the community had a voice in that project, and that we really did center environmental justice principles. And so we built a coalition of neighborhood associations, of civics groups, and came together around principles that center environmental justice in our asks. So things like childcare, workforce requirements that center our communities, money for the fish weir project that we do with the Massachusetts tribe every year. So we really are a force, an organizing force, and a convener in Salem around climate justice. And we'll continue doing that because there's plenty of work to do.
Thanks, everybody. And Bonnie, I just want to mention the work that we're doing. We're partnering with Bonnie and with SAFE and North Shore CDC on a pilot program with the Bar Foundation to explore ways to address extreme heat in Salem, but mostly in the Point El Punto neighborhood. And so that's sort of just kicking off. It has great synergies with everything everybody just talked about, really. And so I think for the city too, I think one of the challenges that we're happy to try to take on, but also it is an interesting challenge, and part of our work is trying to coordinate all of these efforts. And you know, if you live in Salem or if you live in the Point neighborhood, you don't really necessarily care if this is a Bar Foundation project or a state CZM funded project, and in those sort of silos that we tend to put them in, because that's how we're organizing our work, and that's how they're funded, and that's how we report back. But trying to, in the best way that we can, and it's not always smooth or successful, but in the best way that we can, have them be one sort of cohesive effort. And if we're asking for people's input on water quality, and we need to find out about how people manage extreme heat, like those are moments where we can leverage the fact that there are multiple efforts happening, and rather than thinking about it if we have all these disparate initiatives happening, sort of bring them together. And I think that everybody that is working on these different projects has the same sort of attitude about it, which is really an amazing thing to experience. Which brings me to, I'd love to hear from you all about your thoughts on Salem as a community, and what Salem's strengths are in trying to do some of this work.
Yeah, I can start us off because a lot of my work with my firm is across the state, and particularly around the resiliency efforts. I was part of the team that redid the state's municipal vulnerability planning project, so 2.0, and for environmental justice advocates and activists like myself, one of the things, especially for this level of work, what we've been pushing for decades is to center social resilience in climate resilience planning and efforts, right? So think about the social reasons why people are vulnerable, address those root causes, and then when you address those root causes, you're gonna build climate resilience, right? So connecting those two things. And it, as you know, having supported the statewide effort and then doing a lot of work across the state with different municipalities, Salem is actually quite unique in the sense that there is, like, embracement of the idea that social resilience is the foundation to climate resilience. Like, we didn't have to convince the city of Salem and the Resiliency office that this was an important approach to take, that this was an important foundation to how you build climate resilience. I cannot say that it's the same across the state. We haven't yet experienced like abject total resistance and rejection, but we haven't hit all the communities yet, so we're probably gonna get it at some point. We have not had that here, and that's actually been a blessing, because the work is hard. It's hard to work when, you know, our communities are experiencing all kinds of things, especially right now. El Punto is experiencing the residents of El Punto are experiencing all kinds of stressors that have been imposed upon them. But having a partner like the city here, that's one thing that we did not have to worry about. And then we could just worry about, now let's build relationships, let's build trust, and how do we do that? How do we build the muscle of collaborative governance to make this work sustainably over time? So in my perspective, as somebody who works across the states, everybody who has the students here who have the opportunity to learn, what does it look like to do climate resilience work, especially with a municipal partner? Salem is a great place to learn what it looks like to do that well, so that you can transfer that to other spaces that you find yourself in the future. I don't know about our other partners.
You know, I would first say that thank goodness for the Point neighborhood, because they are so resilient as a Latino community in times, especially now in what's going on, but up in the last time this happened, also, and in the time in between. They are amazing people, and we have worked really hard to level the playing field within our church, so there is justice shared, equal power, and so first and foremost, they make it so wonderful to be working in the city of Salem. Then you have Salem and all its residents, and the fact that this is a progressive community that embraces difference and that is very climate conscious, and so the environment is really cool to be doing all of this in that environment. And then we're in Massachusetts. Thank God this isn't Mississippi or something. And you know, we would be fighting against the state to do everything we're doing. It's hard enough to fight against the federal government. So we're blessed in so many ways in all of this. So I think it's wonderful, absolutely helpful to us all.
Yeah, I think Salem is a really unique collaborative community. The nonprofit space is super welcoming. The Barr Foundation grant that Neal mentioned, I just approached the CDC because Barr asked us, and we weren't quite ready, and we were like, do you want to do this with us? And they jumped right in, and thank goodness, because the CDC does an incredible job in the Point community with reaching into the community and really getting that collaborative governance that Dr. Nina is working so hard to develop for us. And I think the thing that I think about is how we just continue to support each other. So when we found out about Nathan's project, Tufts had already sort of adopted us. We still are working with Salem State. I was a Salem State intern, but Tufts just latched onto us because of our offshore wind work, and they have an offshore wind department, and they just keep giving us interns and stuff. And so we were like, what if we did a UEP project on a vision for community-owned energy to support what Father Nathan is developing, so that when that comes to fruition, we find a way to ensure that that's a community-owned project, and how can SAFE make sure we're advocating smart and with technical expertise in order to engage the community in these conversations, so that everyone is involved and aware of what's happening and trying to build this just future together.
That's great, and I would say that from my perspective, working for the city, I think having, especially with Dr. Nathan, like having those efforts happening in the community that we aren't necessarily leading or starting, and you know, I mean, you told the story every time you say wicked old, it just like warms my heart. but you know, I remember visiting Reverend Nathan at his church just to see the building, because he was talking about like, how do I address this building, and we said, we'll come over and see what we can do to help, and but to see it grow and the momentum that it has and the energy, and it's all really coming from him and his congregation and the team that he's built, and to be part of that team, but not feeling the obligation of leading that team. And I would say you are certainly the leader of it, but I would say it truly feels like a very collaborative team effort. And I think that there's just an amazing amount of trust that's built. And similarly, you know, in the work we've been doing with Dr. Nina and with Linnean Solutions, I mean, I think it's challenging as a city when you're going into community-based projects, when there is no necessarily well-defined outcome, right? Like we don't know what the project is. We don't know what will come of this extreme heat pilot. That's by design. You know, we're going out to the community and asking them. I wouldn't have said, let's do a water quality research project, but that's sort of the point. So I think that's there's a lot of faith involved in going down that road, and you know, we've worked a lot together and talking through that and trying to figure that out. So I think that's a real, definitely a challenge, and part of this work is you don't necessarily know where the project's headed, and it also means you don't know who will be taking the lead on that project. It may not be that the city is the one that takes the lead. It sort of depends on where these things go. I don't know how many people were here for the earlier panel, but I did want to ask the question for all of you how things have changed in the new world that we're in, with a different federal administration and everything that's happened since that election and will continue to happen over at least the next 4 years. I'd like to hear your perspective on how that impacts the work that you've talked about and the work that you do generally.
Yeah, things have changed. What is it, 60 days, 70 days in, is that what you said? It was like 20 years. And so there's things that have changed and things that have not changed. You know, funding this work is always difficult. You know, it's talking about writing, we're constantly writing grants, you know, my firm writes grants for our partners, even if we're not gonna be written into the grant, right? That's just the service that we provide, because of our mission. And so I don't know that has changed, it's shifted. We can't rely on federal monies anymore, and maybe we shouldn't have. It's you know, maybe we should not have done that. I think there's a lot of really good questions that now need to be raised locally about how we raise that funding and leverage the abundance locally. Some of the things that have changed, and you know, we've talked about this with our partners, is the immigration focus, or the immigration crackdown or oppression, does definitely change how we interact in community. So in the past, you know, we have students here, you know, who are gonna go around and, you know, use the tool that's been developed to document the trash problems and the rat problems in the neighborhood. And in the past, it wouldn't necessarily be the biggest of deals to have a bunch of, you know, a swarm of students come down into the neighborhood at random days and times to do this kind of thing. But in an era in which we have federal agents pretending not to be federal agents, to harass and seize and disappear human beings, we have to be much more conscious about, okay, we need to now pair people up with community residents, not for any other reason than we are not here to increase anybody's anxiety. And as somebody who does community defense work in East Boston, my neighborhood in Boston, and I'm the one that gets the text messages about, so and you know, I think Ives is in the neighborhood kind of thing. We don't want that. You know, that's an added burden, an added responsibility that we have to the neighborhood. So some of that work has shifted a little bit. And I'm thinking of that as just another opportunity both to build the awareness among students who might not be aware of some of these things, so that you all can talk to your networks about this kind of stuff. But also it's an opportunity to build relationships. Because at the end of the day, we only have each other. And we're gonna get through both climate change and through this nonsense that we're living with right now. We're only gonna get through it if we get through it together.
You know, this time has called on me to take more seriously and listen more attentively to one phrase that Jesus said, be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And as we accompany people to ICE deportation hearings or support them in what a young woman was talking about in the last session about getting information out about an ICE watch and all those kinds of things, and writing grants for climate change and ensuring that the vision is not lost in this time. And if anything I've learned in this is that there's the momentum is there and it can't be stifled. As much as they can push and push and push, it cannot be stifled. And you know, when we started this, we envisioned the parking lot of the church having 20 boreholes and supporting a geothermal system for the church. And not too long, and being collaborative with other people and being open to new ideas, we have this idea of a network geothermal system, and then this overlay with the solar microgrid that might be community owned and not utility owned. That might be, you know, so different and so proactive and so special for people and very functional. You know, we've been doing all this kind of networking, and so we envision a future where there is no gas. Gas is just something that's in the earth and no one touches it anymore. And that, as far as city gas, and that, and hopefully for any other kind of gas for that matter, but that the model is going to be that it's going to be, and it's hard in New England because we have all these old buildings and we have to do all these old retrofits, but we're doing it anyways. We're already doing it now. So we're getting the retrofits done now so that when the money starts to finally come, we can be ready to take this green energy and do it. So we just have to be proactive and keep our heads focused and work together.
So we were founded by a professor from Salem State who founded the Women's and Gender Study Department and fought for equal pay for women, right? We were founded by people at the kitchen table, UU minister, scholars of the democratic economy. Like, we're not stopping, we're not changing course. We are gonna keep being who we are and fighting for climate justice. That's the whole reason we exist as an organization, and we're not gonna censor our language for a grant. Like, we just won't go for that grant. We're scrappy enough where we can do that. We're fortunate that we can do that. And that's our role in our community. So we're not shifting.
Mm-hmm.
So I will, I'll just, to add on to some of what's been said, I will say, you know, the sort of gloom and doom version is there are, you know, last year we worked pretty hard on an EPA Thriving Communities grant with Dr. Estrella Luna and many others there were a lot of federal grant opportunities that could potentially alleviate the, like, let's find these smaller grants to sort of piece together what we're doing, and a lot of what energy was put into identifying, like, okay, this is a good one to go for, and it's appropriate, and we may be competitive. So just identifying the right ones and then thinking about that, there's energy there, and then applying for it, of course, is a lot of work. So we applied for one for that. For the Heaven and Earth project, we just applied for a grant, something called the Coalition for Green Capital, which could provide, tens of millions of dollars in venture, private money and public money to go towards a project like the one that Reverend Nathan has described. And a project of that scale, at some point you need something like that to really, you can only do so many feasibility studies. So I would just say, the Thriving Communities, the latest information I have, I don't know that it's dead, but it might as well be. And then the Coalition for Green Capital, there was an article a couple weeks ago that the FBI is actually going after the organization that is managing that grant, because that money has been given to them, and so they're trying to get it back. We did receive communication that they're going forward with that, so we don't know if that will be an opportunity that still exists. Maybe it will, but I think that there is a reality there. But I think to some of the points made earlier, none of us have ever counted on these grants. I don't think we weren't counting on that EPA Thriving Communities grant to continue the work. It was just one of many opportunities. And having done this work for some time, both as a volunteer and professionally, I think that none of us, I've never counted on the federal government to be the ones that provide the funding or the resources, and that hasn't stopped it. I think eventually we do need that, and the Biden administration did provide support in a way that we hadn't seen before, but it doesn't stop the work. It just changes how we do it and some of the strategies. I'd love to hear from all of you about, as we have some students and members of the community here, how you think they could get involved in some of the work that you're doing, or just get involved in this type of work generally. Also building on what Professor Luna provided in terms of there are community meetings, there's stuff happening in the city all the time. But other than those ideas, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts there.
So I think I'm probably just going to piggyback on what Dr. Luna mentioned earlier, because at least for the work that we do, the general involvement of folks in the city, like being civically engaged, is the foundation, right? And you don't have to be part of the CRLC necessarily. We'd love to have you. Bonnie can tell you more about that. But your going to one of the sustainability meetings, right? And letting the folks who are on that board know, yeah, this is the direction we want you to go in, or asking them questions so that they know where to go. And particularly, and I just want to re-up the point, because I work with a lot of political appointees and things like that, and elected officials, letting them know when they're doing the thing that you want them to do. When you agree with them, you stood firm on, the DEI thing, or you stood firm on book bans, and you stood firm on, the commitment to climate resilience and social resilience. Folks who are in those decision-making positions need to hear you say that. That is going to be a critical piece of them continuing the work. And then if they don't, need you involved so that somebody else, maybe you, put yourself in that position. If you live in the Point neighborhood, Lucy just walked out the door, but she is the lead of the Point Neighborhood Association. She works here at Salem State. If you live in the Point neighborhood, go to those meetings, talk to your neighbors. I think the most important thing for us, because we're always building relationships and building capacity in my worldview is really about building relationships and talking to your neighbors and being able to advocate for neighbors who are not in the spaces that you might be in, right? And that requires you talking to your neighbors. But it also thinking about the story that Professor Ratner mentioned earlier. Sometimes talking to your neighbors is helping them go in the direction that they were inclined to go. Like, you're creating the atmosphere that says you are welcome to be part of a world that we don't live in right now, the world that Father Nathan and San Pedro Church is trying to create just in their neck of the woods, right? That you are invited and welcome to be in here, and that you didn't even, and you might not have even known that you wanted to be here, but you're welcome here. Please come. Like, that's a really important piece of how you can be connected to the work. The work that we do in the Point neighborhood is for Point residents. We love that we have our partnerships here at Salem State. So the students here, some of you are working with us. We want that to continue also. But as you are not just students, you are also residents of the world, you are residents of the city, you are residents of the state. Being engaged where you can in the things that you care about is actually where you need to be.
I would add that we need and we invite your energy and your talent and your ideas and your support. As Professor Pinheiro-Shields said earlier, there are internships available over the summer. We need people in these roles to help us. This is vital. And we're a small church with 2 paid staff, and we can't get it all done. And we're doing all this, right now it's the pressure is on us to do so many things at once because we have to, and we're not going to shirk from that. So we need even more help to help us do this well. We need help in marketing and communications, but your ideas, no matter what they are in this area, are warranted, are helpful, are a blessing to what we're doing. So please bring them forward.
There are so many people who embody hope in Salem and in the world, and I think attaching ourselves to those folks is helpful for growing what we're trying to do. So just as an example, Father Nathan really walks the walk, right? His churches are bilingual services once a month, and to be able to enter his church and be in community with bilingual services is incredible. Every event that Dr. Estrella Luna hosts has translation in real time, right? So really getting to know your neighbor and walking the walk and learning from leaders like these two is such a blessing in Salem, and I really encourage getting. John Hayes runs the CERT committee at the city of Salem, right? So there are all these folks doing great things. And I think SAFE's role in these coming years is to build entry points so folks can get more involved in our work as well. But when I moved to Salem in 2019, I was like, who's doing climate justice stuff? And Marcos was up there with Lucy and Pat Gazemba, who founded SAFE, and they were talking about gas leaks and how they're disproportionately in the point, and that was an entry point for me to get involved. So I would say it's actually quite easy to get involved in your local community, and we're hungry for your energy, and so join a committee, get started, because there's plenty of work to do.
I need to tell a story about Bonnie.
Oh, and I'm hiring an intern this year.
I want to tell a story about Bonnie. She's very humble, and I appreciate that about you as an ally. I appreciate that about you. Several months ago, Bonnie emailed me to say, hey, there's open seats on the sustainability committee. Do you think any of the community researchers might want to be involved? And my first question to her was,
Are they bilingual?
because most of our community researchers are predominantly Spanish speaking. And she said, I'm gonna find out. And then she found out, not yet. And then Bonnie pushed and asked, and all you did, I think, is just ask questions. And it wasn't, do you have interpretation? It was, how can we make interpretation happen? And it took not that long, but I remember getting the email from her saying, and their newsletters are now interpreted and translated into Spanish. And so this is why I say, your involvement and just even knowing these things and simply asking the question, and beautifully asking the question too, not is it this way, because that's a yes or no, but how do we make it this way, right? As somebody who works with a lot of allies, especially white allies, I have an enormous amount of respect for people like Bonnie as an ally. Using she's in that space and she can ask those questions, because that's what she did, is open the door so that the next time that there is an opening on that committee, there's going to be residents who've been a part of the Resilient Together process that might be open to sitting on that committee. Simply because not only they've gone through our process, but the conditions have been created for their full dignified participation.
I'll just add on to some of those ideas, especially for students that, I mentioned Tara Gallagher, her office. I mean, there's a lot happening here on campus. I know there's a pretty incredible geothermal project happening right now that is amazing to see. I think 100% state funded. So I think that there's a lot to get involved with here on the campus. And then the other only thought I would have is just, again, to point to stories like the one of the Heaven and Earth project where Reverend Nathan had a problem with his church building and then sort of thought about like, how can this be more? So I think all of us have those types of issues or problems or projects that we're working on and just sort of thinking through like, how can this be more and who can help me do it, and starting to talk to other people. It doesn't have to be that you go to a volunteer committee, or it can be the stuff that you're doing now. And that's really a great place to start for anybody as well. And I think maybe with that, we can probably go to questions from the audience. Yeah.
I just want to mention also on the topic of how you can get involved, that this is the week right now for students to apply for the Sustainability Council for the fall. It's 4 students form the Sustainability Council on campus, and they do projects to make the campus more sustainable. You get academic credit through the geography department to be on the council, one credit per semester, and you apply through the chairperson of the geography department, Keith Ratner. So it would be great to have people apply if you're interested, or tell your friends if you're graduating. Brielle is one of the Sustainability Council members back there. I don't know if anyone else.
Yeah,
oh,
Kim is here.
Okay, yes, okay, it's more people, good. There are 4 of them right now, they're amazing, and you can hear them tomorrow at 12:15, give a presentation on what they've been working on, which is related to sustainable landscape, but it's a great way to get involved. They pick their project every year, and they have made, each year they've made real difference on campus. So, thanks, sorry to interject that.
I had a question about the grants and how you operate. And you said I didn't really rely on federal grants big time before. I know that Biden had added some new ones, especially through the EPA. But the effects might not be shown for a little while, because I think you'll see more people more groups that were relying more on federal grants start to exit and go out into the philanthropy sphere to seek grants, and that'll make stuff more competitive. And I've seen anecdotal evidence of this already. I mean, once a year I review grants for Boston Foundation. They've like tripled this year already that they assigned to me, and it was, and some of them were big fish that were way outside the scope. They were going for like small, like $25,000 grants, and they had like $10 million budget. And I'm like, are you guys gonna flood with smaller local operations that? So I'm like, how would you adapt to that? Do we just say more philanthropy? Like.
So part of the reason, I can tell you, because I've been on the inside of that Boston Foundation, the grant making schemes there, part of the reason you experience that is that they've been doing a better job of actually marketing and letting people know about the grants. So that's a piece of it also. One of the things that we've been trying to do, and me meaning my firm, but also the grassroots EJ advocates and social justice advocates across the state, we've been in communication with a lot of our larger philanthropies here, and with the idea of urging them to make sure that they anticipate and address what you just described. That folks who have access to more resources in particular, because I've seen some of the applications that's come in for some of the grants at Boston Foundation, and they're like, you are part of an organization that has a billion-dollar investment, endowment. Go talk to your president, your university president, and your trustees. So a lot of them have actually become aware of that threat. to that, and they've been working to tighten up their eligibility criteria, or at least their decision-making criteria, so that the smaller initiatives are not, or, you know, like smaller municipalities, not Boston's especially, have access to funding now that there's been, federal funding has been essentially cut for the foreseeable future. The thing is, and to Neal's point earlier, you know, the federal funding, and this is why we probably shouldn't have ever been reliant on it. When a lot of that money started flowing decades ago, what it did is it allowed municipalities in particular, or smaller organizations, to take their existing budgets and use them in different ways, right? So they maybe had $1 million for, you know, roadway maintenance and improvements, but if they could get, you know, $500,000 from the feds, they can use that other $500,000 for something else, right? Over time, what ended up happening is it became a dependence, right? In that we stopped being creative about how we budget and how we get revenue and that kind of thing. And that's true from the municipal level or to the state level as well. So what we are now forced to thinking at the state level in particular, and with our philanthropies, is how do we actually get more creative about making sure that the money is going into the places where it has been historically neglected, or folks have never had access to it. And there's much more attention to that now, particularly at least among the bigger philanthropies and the family foundations, than in the past. Is it still gonna be a problem? Absolutely. Do I have to compete with somebody at Harvard or BU? Yeah. The thing that we're also trying to do, though, is we're also trying to partner more often. So even with Resilient Together, we have partners, you know, who need funding. You know, they are also nonprofits. They can't do things without the funding. My CPA thinks I'm a nonprofit, but I'm actually an actual business. You know, we need funding also because I've got staff to pay and that kind of thing. So how do we do that? We're more likely to be able to get the funding if we're partnering up together and being more transparent with each other about how we're gonna work together and how we're gonna divvy up funds, than if they were to do that independently of me doing that and that kind of thing. So I think one of the ways that we have actually, and the EPA grant was actually a great example of that, where, you know, there was like 4 different organizations involved with North Shore CDC, the 2 consulting firms, and then another nonprofit organization with the city working together to put this thing together. And even though we might as well just forget about that grant. Let's be pleasantly surprised if it ever comes through. But what it did is that we now have a foundation not only working together, but we can use that grant application to apply for other things and still keep the partnership together. So I think that's the other thing, is that the way that you deal with these pressures to be competitive is to not be competitive. Is to partner, is to choose to partner with people who might otherwise be your competitor, and that takes building relationships with them.
I would add that you gotta dare to do stuff. You have to, we didn't even dare, and he came to us and said, we think you should do this. And so with their boost of confidence, we started to do things, and it led to other things. And so if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't run with your idea and see if it has merit, then you run the risk that you're not gonna get anywhere. And that's far worse. So I echo the sentiment on collaboration. It is the way to go, and it's the strength of our collaboration. It keeps growing. There's other entities that keep being folded into us, and so we meet every 3 weeks, and it's a remarkable experience after every meeting. Very powerful. You gotta just get in there and do it.
Other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. As semi-aware of Salem, but the uniqueness about Salem, but I was wondering just like how the historic parts of Salem and the witch tourism parts of Salem interact with a lot of these initiatives, and if they are collaborative or if they are adversarial, if they're good partners, or how those things interact.
That's wicked wild, right there, I'll tell you. So we're a church founded by one of the accused witches in Salem in 1692, who later in life as an old guy, a white guy that was, he was the wealthiest man in Salem, his name was Philip English. He decided out of defiance of the Puritans to found the Anglican Church. And so we jump in and compete with them to raise money, so we've told our own story. So that, so we wrote a play, and we commissioned the play, and we now offer that play throughout the summer and fall to raise critical monies for our projects and such. And, but we have had amazing collaborators in that sphere as well, not the least of which has been the Salem Witch Museum, very supportive of what we've been doing, and a number of different entities in that sphere. So there's a lot of independence there, and Salem will be Salem, but there's a lot of collaboration there too.
I would just, I'll put a plug in for a conference. It's going into its 5th year, called Preservation in a Changing Climate. It's at the Peabody Essex Museum in September, and it's really about this idea of like, how do we preserve our history and adapt in a changing climate. A lot of it has been focused on flooding, but there's definitely, I think, and so the city, Peabody Essex, Salem Sound Coast Watch, Salem, Historic Salem, Mass Historical,
That's just Seven Gables.
House of Seven Gables, thank you. I'm gonna forget some, but there's Preservation Partners. They're the ones who organize it. We're a part of that. And part of what is happening more and more is this idea of preserving buildings. There's a lot more emphasis on the embodied carbon of a building versus the operational carbon of a building. So, what is the benefit of preserving a building, reusing a building, versus knocking it down and building a high-performing building? There's actually a carbon cost to that. So some of it's about that, some of it's about the materials. So how do you decarbonize and still honor the history there? It's a challenging question, but there's a lot of interaction in Salem on that topic. There is a design guidelines for the historic districts on people who want to put mini splits in their home or put solar on their home, and ways to do that thoughtfully while still honoring the history of the home.
And Neal, I'll just add, we're a National Historic Site, this church, and we have a preservation restriction on us, but we're gonna green it anyways. And because you can work with them and collaborate, and you can do that in a way that's still respectful of the preservation work too.
All right, so should we take one more question, or is it ready to wrap up?
Is there another question?
Is there another question? Could we just thank our panelists for coming and sharing? Really appreciate all of the insights, all of the amazing work that's happening in Salem, including what's happening on campus, and just appreciate you all so much for being here. We have, I know this week, in the Earth Days, we have 2 more days. We have a lot of activities. The posters are on the wall right here. Please check it out. Also, there are some more books. I think there's a couple more in the back. So if you haven't grabbed one, please feel free. These are a giveaway, a gift again from SAFE. So thank you, SAFE. And thank you all for coming. Oh, I should also acknowledge we have City Council Jeff Cohen in the audience. So I just want to also acknowledge and thank Jeff Cohen for coming. As well as all the residents, community residents, and students who are here. Thank you all. Appreciate everyone, and